What up? What's good and what's hood? Kevin Dee TV back in full effect. This next movie I'm breaking down is hip hop's first whodunit movie, and indeed one of the true classics of its time. And it's Who's the Man with Ed Lover, Dr. Dre, and a whole all-star hip hop cast, along with a few comedians such as Dennis Leary, Colin Quinn, Bill Bellamy, the late Bernie Mac, and a few others. Now, the reason why I love this movie so much at the end of the day is because of the simple fact that Ed Lover and Dr. Dre were trying to tell us through that movie what would happen if we didn't stand up for the areas that we lived in, like Harlem, Bronx, Brooklyn, and a few other places. They were pretty much saying that if we don't stand up and fight, that we were pretty much going to get overtaken by the powers that be, and next thing you know, we'll be forced out, which is pretty much what happens. Because as the movie starts out, showing the landscape of Harlem, things of that nature, and as you hear Kid Capri in the background talking about, people giving shout outs and stuff, they zoom in straight on the barbershop. Now, the first few lines of the entire movie was some of the most important, because it started out with Nick Crawford, attending to one of his clients in the barber chair, and he asks him, he's like, what do you think about those condos, Alvin? He's like, I don't even understand why they building no condos in Harlem, Nick. I don't understand why they building any condos no way. Black man can't live in no condo, and Nick Crawford was pretty much a person who was getting fed up about what was going on around him. But at the same time, he was like, yo, I'm not leaving. We got to stay and deal with this ourselves. We cannot just be leaving depending on outsiders, people from the outside looking in, such as Demetrius, in order for us to solve our problems, we got to get together and solve our problems on our own. And that's pretty much what it is. But, going back to the premise of the movie, it starts out with him asking the guy that question. And, you just see a normal day in the barbershop, everybody talking shit, doing their thing, and, pretty much Ed Lover and Dr. Dre was working there. And, they were pretty much, barbers, and they was, and they also had little side hustles here and there, as you can tell from the movie, that, that wasn't the only thing they did. But the barbershop job was their worst job. Because, the haircuts they were giving was just so bad. It was just that, damn, it got to the point where guys would come up in there and they wouldn't even want to cut from them, and they would just have to wait. Nick Crawford started realizing that, as much as I love these guys like sons, I can't keep them around because they're going to do nothing but put me out of business after a while if they continue to stay here. So he pretty much gave them an ultimatum talking about like, either you two shape up and do something with yourselves, or I'm gonna have to kick you out of here. And that's when he gave them that's when he insinuated to them that they should join the police force. And that's when they was like, the police? It was like, Nick, ain't trying to be the man. He was like, Dre, you trying to be the man? He was like, I am not trying to be the man. He's like, you see that, Nick? Dre don't want to be the man. I don't want to be the man. Nobody here wants to be the man, Nick. And Nick was like, give me one reason. They was like, Rodney King. He was like, it's a job, boys. And it was like, that's too violent, Nick. We ain't doing that. And then they told him, you always watching karate movies. And Dr. Dre responded to him. He was like, yo, man, those Bruce Lee movies are BS, man. But when you the man, people really shoot at you. And they was also telling Nick how they had another side hustle going on at a nightclub, how they were going to be promoters. Naughty by Nature was performing there that night, so they figured, they can make up enough money for their rent. They wouldn't have to go take the police test. So they go to the club and, and everything like that. They rack up the money that they need to pay up their rent. But unfortunately, while Naughty by Nature was performing on stage, a few guys come out of nowhere, just start busting shots and telling everybody to get on the floor, and pretty much everybody give up their shit, And Dre ended up getting robbed by one guy, when the dude was like, give me the money, give me the money, man. Stuck the gun in his face. Dre thought he was cool because he had, a little something in his pocket. Dude went in his pocket and took his shit. He was like, sucker, and walked off. So at this point, they had no choice but to apply to go to the police academy. So that's what they did. But while they was filling out the application, you got Lionel Douglas, who was pretty much the best friend of Nick Crawford, trying to convince him to sell his property because, you know, the neighborhood is bad. It's pretty much messed up. They ain't got nothing but a bunch of crack dealers and, you know, and drug addicts running the streets. Kids can't even come out there and play anymore, you know. And he's trying to tell him that the solution is like, you know, selling and getting the hell out of here. And, you know, and Nick Crawford, you know, replied to Lionel by saying, you know, LD, how we gonna get out of this with me selling? We got to stay here, brother. The people who's got to take responsibility for this mess, not the government, and not some outside real estate developer like the one you're working for here. You know, and Lionel said, hey, Demetrius is not the problem, Nicholas. He is just a white boy with a lot of money. And if he wants to invest up here, I say, let's get a taste. He was like, every man has to make his own choices, right? LD, like, don't forget who you are, brother. Don't forget who you are. You know, he told Ed Lover and Dr. Dre to lock up. They walked out. When they walked out, this is where they had their first encounter with Night Train and Rashid, played by both Ice-T and KRS-One. You know, and Nick comes up to Night Train with a gun, talking about, Chauncey, don't let me catch you on this block again. And then you hear Rashid, no, put that gun down, man. What's wrong with you? And Night Train's like, yo, cool out, man. I know this old fool. You know, you're gonna be sorry you ever pulled a gun on me, old man. And, you know, and they was just going back and forth bickering, you know. And next thing you know, the Night Train just told him to get the fuck out of his face. You know what I'm saying? I ain't trying to hear that shit, you know, blah, 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 blah. And Nick was just, you know, he's like, they breaking my heart, man. These kids is breaking my heart. You know, and there was nothing really he can do. But, you know, while everything else is going on, you know, you got Nick Crawford driving through the night, and, you know, because pretty much, he runs into a building that's being burnt out. Because anybody that grew up in New York in the late 80s and early 90s and even beforehand knew how messed up the neighborhood was. You know, the neighborhood had a bunch of burnt out buildings, especially in my area. Where I lived at in my area, they didn't have burnt out buildings per se. But the further you went down the block, the worse it got. Like if you go by 145th Street Bridge where you cross into the Bronx right before you hit, you know, Grand Concourse and 3rd Avenue, every building in that area from Adam Clayton Powell on the Bradhurst was nothing but burnt out buildings, you know, and we don't know, you know, we don't know to this day if all that back in the day was done because of drug activity or gang activity or just by some freak mere coincidence that, you know, these buildings just started burning down. But anyway, you know, he gets out of his car, he sees all the, you know, the women and children crying and, you know, and pretty much watching as, you know, firemen are, you know, putting out the fire. He goes to greet one of the guys in front of the building and he's asking him what happened. He was like, yo, the building burnt down this afternoon. And he was talking about how the fire truck took all day, just like they did with the one that burnt last week up the block. He was like, Nick, there ain't nobody looking out for us out here, man. And Nick was like, damn. And he was like, Nick, where we gonna live? Where we gonna go, man? And he asked him, what's the landlord doing about this? He's like, that Demetrius ain't nothing. He's like, that motherfucker don't give a good goddamn what happens to none of us around here. Nick asked him, he owns this building? And the dude was like, yeah, he owns most of the neighborhood. And then he was like, yo, I'll let y'all sleep in the church tonight. I'll let you in. Because Nick Crawford was also a deacon on top of being a barber. He was a well-known barber, you know, in Harlem. So, you know, and just like he was trying to tell Lionel Douglas not too long ago about all the famous people that came into his barbershop and had their hair cut. And that was part of, you know, his legacy, and he didn't want to, you know, just give it up that quick. But, you know, Ed Lover and Dr. Dre was pretty much, you know, didn't want to go to the police academy, but it ended up happening because they really had no other alternative, because their side hustle got messed up, you know, getting robbed and everything. So it was like they had no choice. So, you know, they end up going through the training and all that stuff, you know, with, you know, and then they end up meeting Sergeant Cooper, played by Dennis Leary, you know, and to me, that was one of Dennis Leary's best roles, you know, as far as him being funny, because it's like, man, I've seen Dennis Leary in a lot of movies where I've seen him play serious characters, cold-blooded characters and funny characters. And to me, this was one of the most funniest roles I've ever seen him play as Sergeant Cooper. Just the way he was going off on them, like, just trying to, and then he was just nuts himself. So at the end of the day, it was just kind of all worked itself out as far as them scenes were concerned, because they were just so funny. But, while they're, trying to do their thing, trying to get used to being cops and everything, meanwhile, Nick Crawford takes it upon himself to pretty much stand up to, the powers that be, the developers that were coming in the neighborhood, pretty much, taking over all the properties. And, the fact that this is nothing to our benefit. Like, it ain't all we going through is buildings being burnt down and then wondering where the hell we got to go the next day, So Nick Crawford took it upon himself one day at church. Everybody was there. He was, he came up on stage and he said what probably was one of the most powerful things that was said in the movie, period, where Nick Crawford was like, "We in the Harlem community are faced with the threat of creeping gentrification. But that's a fancy word. It means people move to your block and make it nice. They make it so nice that you can't even afford to live there unless you're a judge or something like that." And he was pretty much telling the black folks in the crowd how we need to take back what's ours. He's like, we need to own our own businesses. We need to, we need to own our own homes. And he was pretty much saying, like, we need to take Harlem back. And mind you, the main guy, Demetrius, who was buying up all the property, he was on TV protesting him, him with a few other people, they was all out there with picket signs and stuff like that. And he was pretty much, telling the people in the hood what it is. And this is why it's going on. And ironically, Nick Crawford was on the news talking about it, and Dr. Dre and Ed Lover saw him. And then while he was talking, you see Demetrius, the main real estate guy, looking at this. You see two goons come up and they like, "You call us, boss?" He's like, "I need to talk to you about a problem I'm having," and they still trying to do their thing and, and this, that, and the third, a little bit of time goes by. They, one of the funniest parts of the movie to me is when they was first on the beat and they saw a Jeep drive around and they was like, "Yo, isn't that Jawan's Jeep?" They was like, "Hell yeah, that's his Jeep, man." He's like, "I'm gonna pull him over so he pull and give me that $10 he owes me." The car pulls over and it's funny. Shit is funny because you see the windows roll down, you see a whole cloud of smoke coming out the car, so they was smoking chronic. And then they trying to stash all their shit, trying to stash the guns and trying to stash everything they had, and they just getting ready for the police to pull up on them. And and it happens to be Busta Rhymes and the leaders of the new school, and they all up in there, and then that lover comes to the window and Busta's just trying to play it off like, "I don't understand, man, we just chilling, man, we just sitting there chilling, like, you see what's my people, me and my men's like." He's like, "What's going on, man, why we being prohibited?" And then Ed Lover cut him off and said, "Jawan." He was like, "Oh shit, Ed Lover, you the man?" He's like, "That's right, Jawan, I'm the man." He was like, "Who's the man? Ed Lover's the man? Damn." And then he was like, "Yo, Jawan." He was like, "Dr. Dre? You the man too?" He's like, "Oh, that shit is fucked up, kid. Fucked up." You know what I'm saying? So, in other words, there's some guys in the street, because Ed Lover was saying it to him before they pulled Busta Rhymes and him over. He was like, "This is the trip, Dre. Never thought we could be cops. We're going to have to be doing a lot of explaining in the street." Because, motherfuckers was not going to take that, like, in the hood. They like, "Oh, you done sold out, man. You done became one of them, blah, blah, blah." Like, that was part of what you would have to go through if you became a black cop. It's kind of like that, being caught on a tightrope type thing. So, it was like, but after all of this is going on, they decided to take it upon themselves one night to go see what Nick was up to, at the barbershop or whatnot. But unfortunately, as we, the audience, see before they do, is that the barbershop was quiet. All you saw was a fan going on. And all you just saw was the last thing you saw was a picture of all three of them, Nick, Ed and Dre, in the picture, Then you see these two trying to walk up to the barbershop, and then what you see is Nick dead on the floor. He's already been shot with blood on the floor and everything. So as soon as they come closer to the barbershop, it just blows up and it explodes. So now their friend is dead. You know, they bury him and everything. And, you know, Lionel comes up to them and says, you know, I need to talk to y'all for a minute. And he told Ed and Dre how pretty much he had talked with Nick's lawyer that morning. And he was like, y'all guys are named in the will. And he's like, he left y'all the barbershop. He was like, the barbershop? Damn. And he was like, I know some people that'll pay you a lot of money for that property. You know, and that level was like, see, I don't even care about money right now, man. I just want to find out who killed Nick. Lionel was like, well, maybe it was the same people that has been setting these fires. And Dre was like, any other ideas, Lionel? He's like, he did have a nasty exchange with that crack dealer Chauncey, you know, talking about Night Train. So they was like, all right, man, we gonna go see him. Like, you know, blah, 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 you know. And they go see him and they asking him what's up. Like, yo, what's up, Chauncey? You know, he's like, name's Night Train, all right, nigga, you know what I'm saying? You know, and the chick was laughing at his name and he's telling her to shut the fuck up. And he's asking these two, like, in their police uniforms. He was like, what is this, man? Halloween or some shit? And Ed was like, your eyes don't deceive you, brother. We are cops, you know? So then they started asking him about, you know anything about Nick's murder, man? He's like, yeah, man, I know something about it. You know what I'm saying? I know homeboy got smoked, but I ain't had shit to do with it. I ain't had no beef with him, you know what I'm saying? And blah, 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 blah. So he trying to tell him that. He takes his gun and throws it at the liquor bottles, you know, standing at, you know, on display at the bar. The bartender gets mad and is like, oh shit, who's gonna pay for my fucking booze, pig? Ed Lover was like, mine's yours. He's like, where'd you get the piece from, Chauncey? Like, my name is Night Train, fool. You know, and he was just saying some shit. Like, when they asked him, where'd you get the gun from, man? He was like, it fell off a fucking truck, all right? He was just like, no, man, what's up here, son? And he was like, well, shit. He's like, well, I'll tell you what, Chauncey, I got you on gun charges and drug charges. Motherfucker, you tell me a story. He was like, yo, man, you need to just cool the fuck out on him, brother, man. You need to be talking to Lorenzo Martin, man, 315 West 137th Street. But I ain't no motherfucking snitch, man. Heard that? Shit, you ain't heard that from me, bro. You know? So he just took his drugs and flushed it down the toilet, you know? And when they went to 315 West 137th Street, the building was abandoned. So, of course, they was mad at Night Train due to the fact that he lied to them. So when they tried to go back to his apartment to confront him, you know, they kicked in the door and he was dead in his chair, like, you know, with blood coming off his head. And they was like, damn, Dre, somebody talked to that motherfucker already. Like, he could have cut himself shaving, man. Like, shit, he's dead as a motherfucker, son. Gee, shit. You know, and then they come face to face with Run DMC because they're detectives and, you know, they trying to figure out who killed him. And they was asking, you know, Ed and Dre why they were there. And they was like, well, we was wondering if he knew something about the Nick Crawford murder. And they were pretty much putting them down because due to the fact that, wait a minute, y'all not even detectives. Why are y'all out here trying to investigate anything? Like, you know, you guys are just patrolmen, you know? So, and that was pretty much a dilemma that they had due to the fact that they were just patrolmen. But as much as they wanted to find out what happened with their friend, you know, they pretty much, their options was limited only due to the fact that, you know, they was, you know, trying to, you know, solve this murder the best way that they could. Because they even came back to Sergeant Cooper and asked him, and he kept cutting them off every time he asked them, and he was like, He's like, I got another task for y'all. Y'all gonna watch after Tony Clams, you know, the mobster. He's in Harlem Hospital right now, so he's being on 24-hour watch, so he doesn't get, you know, doesn't get killed, you know, in between now and when he's supposed to testify in Brooklyn. So, you know, his gallbladder acted up, so now there's a hit out on him, you know, and they wanted them to, you know, pretty much watch him over and, you know, and take over, you know, every 8-hour shift that the cops was using in order to protect him. So, you know, in order to do that, they went to Harlem Hospital. They was looking after this guy, Tony Clams, and, you know, and he was pretty much showing them how racist they were. You know what I mean? So it was just like, yo, we can't stand here, you know, all day guarding this racist piece of shit, man. You know what I'm saying? So what they did was that they called their boy Frankie, you know, played by Colin Quinn, a very good comedian, and he had a very good character in the movie. He was pretty much a numbers guy who would just come in to all the folks, and if they wanted to play some numbers, you know, he would just write down the numbers for them, take the money, and then go to the store and then, you know, put them in. So that was pretty much Frankie's job. And then he would do other things for Ed and Dre here. That's when they called him tell him to come to Harlem Hospital and watch over Tony Clams while we go find out, you know, some more things about what's going on with Nick, you know? So while they're doing that, they come across, you know, a place where a building was supposed to be, you know, erected. And, you know, while that's happening, you know, Yo-Yo comes out of nowhere, slaps the shit out of Ed Lover, you know what I mean? And they're talking about, you ain't boned my sister, da-da-da-da. That was another funny premise of the movie, how Ed Lover was always getting smacked up because he was always lying about the women that he slept with since the first part of the movie. You know, I thought that was funny. But anyway, getting back to that. When they looked in the thing and they were seeing what they were doing, he was like, oh, hell yeah. He's like, they've been drilling here for about 6 months. You know, and they found out it was one of Demetrius's properties. But this is before Nick Crawford got killed. They went ahead and asked him, how come you've been doing all this drilling, but you ain't built not one damn condo yet, and all these properties you done took over in the last few years? Y'all haven't really did nothing. All y'all doing is drilling, and like what? You know, the guy just kept telling them, hey, like, yo, it's private property. You ain't supposed to be here. And Ed Lover was just like, all right, well, we'll just borrow some of your private property. You know, took a sample of the dirt that they was, you know, that they were collecting. And, you know, he was like, dude was like, I don't think Mr. Demetrius was like that very much. You tell Mr. Demetrius to kiss my ass. You know, so they you know, because before Nick Crawford died, they were just wondering why the hell they kept, you know, drilling in all these areas where y'all was supposed to be building new buildings, you know, and they just couldn't figure it out, you know, and they kept going to, you know, one of the guys in the lab in the police, you know, in the police station, and they kept, you know, they kept asking him where the prints from this gun came from, and then why are they collecting samples rather than, you know, erecting buildings like they're supposed to, and things of that nature. So then when Nick Crawford dies, it just makes it even worse now, because it's like, oh, okay, now there's a connection. Nick Crawford had the last piece of property on that block. Not only did he refuse to sell, but then he was protesting against the guy who was buying up all the property in Harlem. Then all of a sudden, he's dead. So now we have a twist here. It's like, okay, now he's dead because of speaking his mind and speaking, you know, and trying to, you know, save the neighborhood. But now the only question is whether Demetrius was involved in that, or whether, you know, it was just some random act of, you know, violence, you know, as it do happen in the hood every now and then. You know, you'll have a good prominent person that's been in the neighborhood a long time. And I've known some people like that, you know, that just gotten killed for no apparent reason, just because people wanted to come in there and rob them, and, you know, just stupid shit, you know, that people have gotten killed for. So it will, you know, that was the possibility, but nobody really knew why. So they was just trying to figure it out, like, you know, as time went on, as they came across Night Train and, you know, and people like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, now what their friend did is like, okay, now we know part of the reason why, you know, because now he had the last piece of property on the block, and in order for Demetrius to control that whole neighborhood, he had to take that property over too. And this is where, you know, Lionel comes in, because, you know, Demetrius told him, you know, told Lionel that, yo, he was like, Lionel, I hired you to acquire certain properties in Harlem, but I must say that I'm very chagrined that your friend Nick, who owns a very important part of that godforsaken block, has refused to sell to me. I can't make any moves until I acquire his property. And Lionel was trying to tell Demetrius, hey, I tried to do everything I can. He was like, no, you haven't. He was like, you must take care of this. We had a deal. And if you renege on it, he's like, I'll give your markers back to a gift to the guys that you owe that money to. Now that would be very unfortunate. And this is before Nick Crawford found out about the people getting burnt out and, you know, happening, what was going on in the neighborhood with buildings constantly being burnt down and everything. So this is where Lionel kind of plays his part in it. That's why at the funeral he was trying to tell Ed Lover and Dr. Dre, like, yo, yeah. Nick gave you the barbershop as part of his will, And then, you know, he automatically told them, you know, how he knew some people that would pay a lot of money for that property. So automatically he was getting on it just as fast as, you know, Nick didn't even get buried yet. And he's already telling them about how people want to buy the property. You understand what I'm saying? And that's all he was, you know, getting on. But, you know, they still trying to figure out what's going on. And they got led back to Demetrius, you know, because of the samples or whatever. And they was just like, okay. You know, and that's when they just, you know, they decided to start asking him questions. And ironically, a friend of theirs, you know, who was the niece of Lionel, you know, Tisha, played by, you know, Cheryl James of Salt and Pepper, you know, she, you know, is pretty much with Demetrius trying to set up a fashion show that she had in New York that she was trying to set up, you know, and then, you know, Demetrius was gonna, I guess, you know, invest, you know, in her brand or whatever, you know what I mean? So when they came in, they was kind of shocked that she was standing there with him, and you know, and they was just pretty much asking him like, okay, how the hell you owning all this property, but then all of a sudden when you know you didn't have that property, which was the barbershop, so it was like now it is kind of beginning to make sense to us why, you know, things were going on the way they were going on, like Nick dying because he, you know what I'm saying? He was like, you buying up all the properties in Harlem. Nick is leading demonstrations to try to stop you, and you try to get the man to sell, but he wouldn't sell. Bang, he's dead. You know, and he's like, yo, Dre, you smell something? He was like, I smell bullshit. He was like, yeah, I knew it. I knew there was bullshit in here. Demetrius is like, yo, if you're implying that I had anything to do with that murder, I can assure you that I do not do business that way. Now, is there anything else that I can do to help you, gentlemen? It was like, no, thank you for your time, and left. You know, and the three of them were in the, in the elevator going back and forth with each other about how bad he is and all this other stuff. And they was trying to tell Tisha how she shouldn't be fucking with him because I think he got, bad business practices going on that we don't know about. And she was like, nah, I don't think so. She was like, I'm a pretty good judge of character. If I thought the man was dirty, I wouldn't be doing business with him. So, they ended up, calling back to Harlem Hospital, just making sure everything was okay. But ironically, by the time they got there, Tony Clams have already been shot. And Sergeant Cooper went in their ass. Like, you'd have to watch the movie yourself to see the way Dennis Leary went off on him, because that was one of the funniest scenes in that movie. Just the way he was, yeah. you know what I mean? So he pretty much, demoted them. You know what I mean? He was talking about how they were on foot patrol, you know what I mean, and shit like that. So, they was pretty much, getting in a lot of trouble in the police department because they were doing shit that they weren't supposed to be doing. You know? And just like, even the part where they were still stalking Demetrius, trying to figure out certain things and whatnot, and they was in a cab, Fat Five Freddy, another guy who was in the movie, you know what I mean? He was the cab driver, they looking at, Demetrius or whatever, and the black guy who was training them in the academy, Growls, he was in the back in his own car, stalking them, because that's what, the captain told him to do. He was like, Growls, I want you to keep an eye on those two. So when they was stalking Demetrius, Growls was stalking them. So he was like, yo, Fat, you got any ideas, man? He's like, don't worry, I got you covered like rubber on this one. Watch this. He started flashing his lights and shit. One of the hoes standing on the corner. You know what I mean? So he pretty much told her to, like, yo, go handle him, girl. You know what I'm saying? So Ed Lover goes into the restaurant while, and he's talking to Demetrius and everything, and you just see Demetrius kind of like shrugs his head to the side like, yo, come on. And he pretty much signals his goons, and they throw him out of the restaurant through the glass. So with that being said, they got suspended from the force. So now, it's pretty much all messed up at this point, and they didn't care. They continued to, investigate and do what they got to do. And through finding Lorenzo Martin, who was a guru, a gangstar, they started, putting more pieces to the puzzle together. And they kept coming across this gun with a green handle on it, and they was just wondering like, okay, this is not, the type of guns that you normally see in the hood. So they just kept talking about, Lorenzo told them about a warehouse out in Brooklyn. They went out there, they investigated it, and they came across two of Demetrius's goons, and they were about to kill him until Krause, who was still following them, ended up shooting one of the guys and detaining the other. So, he was like, what you guys doing here? He was like, Krause, this place we just found some guns. This warehouse is full of them. He was like, you got a warrant? He was like, Krause, we're not cops no more. Who gives a damn about a police warrant? Can we please go see Mr. Demetrius? You know what I mean? Because Demetrius was the one, that was helping Tisha with her fabric to get to Brooklyn so she can be able to, get the necessary garments that she needed set up. Queen Latifah was there helping her too, and stuff like that. So, it turned out to be a good fashion show and it was cool. But, unfortunately, them three came and Demetrius was in the crowd and he tried to walk off. And then she was even like, where you going, Demetrius? She's like, don't go. The show just started. He was like, no, the show's fine. You know what I'm saying? It's not that, but I got to go. And as soon as he tried to run, they came. And, and Demetrius was like, your chief is going to be awfully upset when he hears how I've been treated. He was like, first of all, he's going to hear how you put those guns through Tisha's warehouse. And then we was like, we're going to pin Nick's murder to your ass. And then Demetrius was like, that's absurd. If there were any guns in Miss Braxton's warehouse, I know nothing about it. And as far as Nick Crawford goes, I never murdered anyone. He was like, if you didn't, then who did? Demetrius was like, you ever read the Bible? He's like, the book of Daniel says, every man's sword should be against his brother. And that lover was like, man, what the hell are you talking about? And Demetrius just started laughing like, you really don't get what I'm trying to say, don't you? In other words, he was trying to say the shit was hit closer to home than you think. It wasn't my guys that did it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't my goons. It wasn't nobody directly under me that did it. So he's pretty much saying that the person who killed Nick Crawford was closer to home than you think. And when he told him that, you see Lionel coming down the stairs, trying to book a flight for Jamaica, trying to get the hell out of Dodge. And when he booked the flight, you just see that lover standing there asking him, why'd you go to work for Demetrius, Lionel? He was like, what are you doing in my house, Ed? He's like, we had a talk with him tonight. Well, he was like, try to help the man purchase some, a few properties up and around the hood every now and then, but there's nothing wrong with that. And he was like, well, what's in Jamaica, man? He was like, vacation? Oh, kind of spur of the moment thing, huh? He was like, yes, Dad. He was like, what else were you doing for Demetrius? He's like, I told you. He's like, and that lover asked him again, nothing else. Then Lionel was like, what's your point, Ed? He's like, this is my point. We found a warehouse full of guns out in Brooklyn, and maybe you know about that. And maybe you know who killed Nick. And Lionel was like, I don't know anything about warehouse guns or who put that bullet in Nick. And that's when he told on himself. That lover was like, bullet? He was like, everybody thinks that Nick was killed in the explosion. Police didn't say nothing about no bullet. He's like, how'd you know he got shot, Lionel? Were you there? And he started like cringing up, like you could just tell that he was guilty, like, And then that lover just looked at him with kind of like a sad look on his face, like, why'd you kill Nick, man? And he just started crying on the way. He's like, I tried to save Nick. I said, Nick, sell the property. But he wouldn't listen. He's like, what was I supposed to do? And that lover was like, that shit don't make no difference, man. Nick loved you. You killed your best friend. You sorry motherfucker. For real. And then Lionel pulled the gun out on him and was like, just shut up. Just shut up. Demetrius was setting me up. He was gonna ruin me. And I couldn't let that happen. I'm on my way now to take care of Mr. Demetrius. But now I'm gonna have to get rid of you first, Ed. He was like, I am sorry, Ed. And just as he was about to pull the trigger, Dr. Dre came out of nowhere with a cannon and was like, not as sorry as I am. And that was pretty much the end of the movie. They built the barbershop back up. They was giving everybody them atrocious haircuts again, and shit like that. And they found out at the end of the movie that the real reason, well, they was trying to prove it to their superiors at first, but they couldn't until the end, that the real reason why Demetrius was buying up all the property, it wasn't even necessarily to make Harlem look better again. It had nothing to do with that. That's why they were asking, why the hell are you got all these properties and you got all this land and you ain't building a damn thing? Like, what is up with that? Come to find out that he was looking for oil in Harlem. That's why their superiors couldn't believe it. They was like, when they first came at them with that about how they were trying to find oil in the hood, you know what I'm saying? He's like, oil. He's like, that's why Demetrius is buying up all the property. He was like, see, Nick Crawford was sitting on the last piece of property on the block, and that's why Demetrius had him killed. And the superior was telling him, you mean to tell me that one of the biggest real estate developers in this city is digging for oil in Harlem? And this is when they got suspended. He was like, listen to me. There's oil in Saudi Arabia, not Harlem. There's oil in Venezuela. There is no oil on 125th Street. Am I clear? He's like, you're lucky that Mr. Demetrius is not pressing charges. Now clean out your lockers and get the hell out of here. And that's how they got suspended. But they was pretty much trying to prove that they superiors at first, but that's what that was. So after they got through, proving their point, Demetrius and Lionel got locked up, and they was, and the police, pretty much their superiors was asking them if they wanted to come back, even if they, and they was even made a, gave them an opportunity to become detectives. They was like, nah, they don't want no more police work, like too violent. and they were saying, well, you guys need jobs. So what they did was that they took the money that, that they had, and they pretty much was trying to fix up the barbershop. And while they were fixing up the barbershop, Dre sees a rat, he got a gun and he shoots at it. And then you just see oil just start, splurting out of the floor. And they like, yo, what's that black stuff? Turn out Demetrius was right. And then at the end of the movie, you see the barbershop fixed back up with a little oil thing going in the back. All them guys, like I said before, getting them atrocious haircuts and everything. But that's pretty much the end of the movie, man. And I would advise anybody who was not from that era, that's really in the 90s hip hop and and things of that era. Who's the Man is one of the real good hip hop movies that I think you guys should go watch. For those of y'all of the younger generation, those of y'all from my era, in the 90s, y'all already know what it is, so you wouldn't even have to get on it. But in any event, that's pretty much what was the premise of Who's the Man. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button, and leave a comment, and so we can break down any other movies that you feel that I need to break down. Until then, I wish you all well, and I will check y'all later.